Today's quick and simple feast of a snack is garlicky oyster mushrooms on black rye toast. It's a feast morning, noon or night. Hello, I'm Nadine Abensur. I'm a cookery writer and the author of 7 cookery books, including the Cranks Bible, which has just recently been reprinted. I'm a gallery owner and curator, and I'm an aspiring musician and artist. But my passions invariably lead me back to the kitchen. I can't help it. I always end up back here. I enjoy the honesty of cooking, the bonhomie of the table, and the connection to the earth that cooking assumes. I live on a lush acre in Mullumbimby. It's absolutely magnificent. It's so green and fertile, and close to many thriving farmers markets. And I'll use the produce from those markets in this series of short videos. Hello and welcome back. Today I'm going to make mushrooms on toast. Only I'm going to use these beautifully delicate, pale oyster mushrooms. These incredibly fine gills and the most really almost imperceptible flavour. But I'm going to cook them in butter and garlic and white wine, and I'm going to serve them on a black rye toast. And it's just a lovely, for me it's anything. It's a breakfast, or it's a lunch, or it's a light supper. It's something to have with a friend in front of TV. It's just a really easy but utterly delicious little arrangement. And in fact, I've served it as a starter, just a couple of pieces of, like a bruschetta, but with this very delicate filling, which we'll get to in 2 seconds. So much of my cooking involves chopping garlic very finely, chopping parsley or coriander or basil, a little butter, a little olive oil, sometimes quite a lot of butter and quite a lot of olive oil. And then pretty much letting things do their own thing, letting vegetables simmer and soften at length. So much of my food is about that. It's about bringing out the inherent flavour of the vegetable. And it's really not rocket science, but it does take attention, and it does take engagement, and it does take time. So even with something as simple as a mushroom on toast, I want the mushrooms to reveal everything that it has. There's so much more to the flavour of a vegetable, including something as apparently insipid looking as this. And yet, when you cook it slowly, it reveals layer upon layer upon layer of flavour. It's a bit like a human being. It's like, at first sight, you might see one thing, and then as you delve into the personal, into anything really, the more deeply you look, the more you find. And I find that that's just as true in cooking, in the way I approach my ingredients. See, the reason I do this is because I love it. It's because I see the potential lurking inside these amazing raw ingredients. And nothing makes me happier than to coax out the full potential. So with that approach, cooking isn't a chore at all. It's almost ecstatic. It's a truly engaged process, and I think that's what we all seek. We seek that sense of losing ourselves in something, and cooking has that ability. And on top of that, it's then an offering. It's then something to share. So it for me ticks so many different boxes. So here we are. I've got my garlic finely chopped. I'll just set it aside for a second, and I'm ready to go. That's pretty much all the advanced preparation I need to do on this. So I'm going to melt a good fat knob slice chunk of butter in a pan. Let it just start to foam and bubble, and then I'll add the oyster mushrooms. I'm not. I might just take the toughest bit off there, but. I remember picking these once in Sussex, in England. And they were that size, and that's before they started to be cultivated. They were much grayer, and I think that's probably the first time I ever cooked them like this, and I've been doing it ever since. And we're talking about 30 years ago. So I'm just going to let these reduce, because even these mushrooms, which are not as waterlogged as most, are still going to release their juices and soften and go almost translucent. In fact, they will go translucent. So that'll take about 10 minutes. And about halfway through their cooking, I'll add the garlic. I don't want it to add it too soon. I don't want it to colour or brown. So I need to just get these at least part of the way through the cooking before I add the garlic. There we go. And while that's doing, I'll put the toast on. I'm just going to do that in the grill. You can do it in a toaster too, but I've done it in the grill. And I might just add a tad more butter there. So it's about 30 grams of butter altogether, and it's 250 grams of oyster mushrooms. And you can make that serve two as a little starter, but as a meal, I'd say the whole lot. It's just a perfect little meal. And you know what? These are so soft, they're taking even less time. It's more like 5 minutes. And at this stage, when they're already quite softened, I'm going to add a good glug of white wine and then let them reduce. Let all those juices thicken up. And I'm going to add some parsley or some chives or a bit of both. I think I'll do a bit of both. Yes, roughly chopping the parsley. Oh, and while I remember, some black pepper in there. Now I can smell that wine cooking away. Some salt. Again, I didn't put the salt in too soon, I mean. But you can see, look, all those juices there. So now we're going to have to reduce that. Look, I want to keep some of that liquid there, some of that juice. And I might just put again, you don't have to, optional, but I think I'll add just a tablespoonful of cream to that. I hadn't planned to, but can't resist. There we go. I mean, that was less than half a tablespoonful of cream. But what it does to the whole thing is just rather glorious. And that's it. And the toast is ready. So I get my plate there. I think I'm going to cut it in half. Cut that in half. Let's see if we can get ourselves some nice little... There we go. And then I'm going to switch that off, add the parsley in there. just a few chopped chives. There you go, parsley, chives. There you go, parsley and chives in here, and that's all it takes to make a mushroom on toast fit for a happy person. Yummo. And then just a tiny bit of, I've got some radish and sunflower seed sprouts. A little garnish on the side. And I've got a little vinaigrette, because I always have a jar in vinaigrette in my pantry, homemade. And I just put a tiny bit of that, and the vinegar will be perfect for cutting through the richness of all that cream and garlic and butter. And here you go. It's a very, very simple but delicious mushrooms on toast. Touch of black pepper, and that's all it takes. So it's simple, it's elegant, it's rich without being heavy, it's delicate, and yet it's got an amazingly intricate and unusual flavour. For me, this is the perfect brunch, and brunch is my favourite meal of the day. In fact, it's often my only meal of the day, so I like it to be quite rich, but not heavy. I want it to really fulfill me, or fulfill some need, without making me feel heavy or overfed, or it's just perfect, and the elegance of it satisfies me on many levels. I know some of you looking at this would be thinking, God, how does she get away with that? You know, all that butter and all that cream, the bread and the gluten and all the goodness knows what. But you know, I believe in making everything that I eat as perfect, as beautiful. It's my philosophy of life. I like my home to be like that. I like everything in my life to be like that. I like it all to have that indefinable quality of beauty. And I'm quite happy to eat this and then not eat again till tomorrow if necessary. And there's a name for it these days. It's called intermittent fasting, and it allows you to pretty much indulge in whatever pleases you, but not in a compulsive, gluttonous way. It's measured, it's done with reverence. And in that way, I think we can eat just about anything. And I talk as someone who has had a list of sensitivities, most of which I can now cross off, because I know that as long as my eating habits are contained and that I leave enough space, and really it requires that space, because it is whole unto itself. I don't know how to express that better. It's complete. It provides such a multi-layered experience that really, I promise you, it won't have you running to the cupboard for chocolate or, you know, that little snack that you just have to have. You won't do that, because everything that you've cooked will have satisfied. It will have satisfied you on so many levels. And really, that's an emotional thing, that's a psychological thing, that's an aesthetic thing. I mean, I can go on, and yet all I've done is mushrooms on toast. And I'd like to think that this is a reflection of all my cooking. So, on that note, I'll see you next time. Bon appétit.